Well, welcome to our weekly call with Vaccine Choice Canada. My name is Ted Kuntz and I'm the president of Vaccine Choice Canada. We have another incredible turnout this evening. I understand more than 1,000 people have registered for this meeting. So a special welcome to all of those of you joining us for the first time. I hope you value and see what you see and hear tonight and want to join us every week. I assume many of you are here because of our conversation with Dr. David Martin last week. Dr. Martin made many disconcerting claims about the role of the Canadian government and research institutions with regards to the development of the mRNA vaccine. We understand that the video has been viewed more than 400,000 times. The allegations of racketeering and crimes against humanity are serious, and it is the position of Vaccine Choice Canada that these allegations require further investigation to determine their merit. Randy Hillier, the MP for the riding of Lanark, Frontenac, and Kingston, has taken a keen interest in Dr. Martin's statements and asked if he could join us this evening to give us further information on this matter. Randy, welcome to Vaccine Choice Canada, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Ted, and thanks to everyone at Vaccine Choice for all the good work that you've been engaged with and involved with, especially in the last 17, now going on 18 months. And it's my pleasure to join you. I know it's being streamed by a very large audience tonight, and I really do. The information that Dr. David Martin provided us last week was astonishing. It wasn't the first time he revealed all of that. Well, it was the first time he revealed all of that information, but he had revealed some of that information earlier, and it is a shocking revelation of what some people know of what's going on in the world. And Dr. David Martin is probably one of the most astute, one of the most knowledgeable, credible individuals that I've had the pleasure of talking with, and it really is astonishing that not as many people know what's happening in our world as compared to what Dr. David Martin knows what's happening in our world.
I would agree with you, Randy. It's shocking that somebody from outside of the country knows more about what's happening inside this country than our own citizens and our own politicians. And I have to say, I was dumbfounded by what I heard last week. It was disconcerting, and we need to figure out what we're up against here.
Well, that is, the first time I came across Dr. David Martin was a number of months ago. I believe it's hard to tell time during COVID, but it was some period of time ago. And I watched this incredibly credible individual speak with Rhino Fulmich, and the revelations of racketeering and criminal conspiracy and antitrust violations. And he was quite clear, like there was no mincing words with Dr. David Martin. He was quite clear and unequivocal that there was criminal activity going on by Dr. Fauci and others, Peter Daszak and a number of others, over the gain of function research, and the evidence that he provided with his research and knowledge of patent law knocked me off my chair. And I said, how can this be true and also be unknown at the same time? So I immediately looked up Dr. David Martin to see if this was some sort of charade, some sort of facade. I took those patent numbers that he had revealed, and I looked them up on Google, and it was all true and astonishing. And I said I had to share his information as well. And thankfully, and I'm not sure why, Facebook and Twitter and Odyssey didn't censor that information, and a great number of people saw it, and that was the first of it. So, and then last week, when you had Dr. David Martin on, he revealed even further information about Canada's role and our complicity in this racketeering and these antitrust violations. And obviously, and I had talked to David before the show last week and had discussed some of this information with regarding Acuitas and Arbutus and the role of Public Health Canada, the UBC. Pardon me.
Nice to have you back.
I'm not sure what happened there. However, and again, shocking evidence. But the first thing I asked Dr. David Martin, I said, in my experience in Canadian politics, if anybody says anything negative about anybody in political office or in public office, the first thing we are faced with is a defamation suit. That's, even if there isn't any merit or any validity to the defamation, they'll try to silence you with the threat of legal action. So my first question to David was, has Dr. Fauci or Peter Daszak or anybody else launched a legal action against you? And he said no. And that's pretty astonishing. When somebody alleges that another is engaged in criminal activity and the person who that allegation is lodged against does not bring a defamation suit, you got to ask why. And of course, the answer is obvious. Dr. David Martin's information is not only credible and well cited, but the last thing Dr. Fauci wants to have happen is to have his record come under the scrutiny of the courts and full disclosure and discovery by an investigative attorney who is seeking to find the truth. So Dr. Fauci has not brought forth any suit against Dr. David Martin. And as we discuss these elements, and in parliamentary and legal language, what Dr. David Martin has done is he has laid out what's called a prima facie case. So on the face of it, this evidence needs to be examined further. And so I've spoken with him, spoken with others. Many of your audience will have known some of the other groups that I collaborate with. And we have engaged the services of legal counsel, both here in Canada and in the United States, to examine this evidence that Dr. David Martin has revealed. And for those who have not seen this, he has also produced what's called the Fauci dossier, which is available on many websites. I have it on my No More Lockdowns website, but many others have it. If you Google Fauci dossier for David Martin, you'll find it. And it's a well-cited document that indicates the evidence that he has. And so we have engaged the services of legal counsel to examine this dossier, to have further discussions with Dr. David Martin, myself, and others. And unlike the United States, although Canada and the United States have a common heritage and common law, our processes and our procedures differ in some manners. In Canada, we have the lawful authority as citizens to bring forth what's called a private information. Typically, when there's a criminal investigation in Canada, we leave that up to law enforcement to undertake. But we also have the ability to lay a private information. That's where an individual brings forth evidence to a justice of the peace or a judge and swears this evidence to be true and requests a criminal investigation regarding this evidence. So that is the path we are now examining, we're evaluating, not only to see a full slate to create a fuller, detailed picture of this prima facie case, but also to determine a very credible individual to bring this information forward. We know in today's society of cancel culture and the woke left and the scorn and ridicule of the media and government, we need to have an individual who is beyond reproach, whose credibility and integrity stands without question to bring this private information forward. So those discussions are underway at the moment. I'm collaborating and coordinating with other groups to help fund this legal action. And I would encourage, groups like Liberty Coalition will be working with Vaccine Choice and others. I'm confident to say that Dr. David Martin's evidence will not remain quiet. It will not remain silent. That the people of Canada, I, as an elected member, have an obligation to bring this information forward to courts, along with others. And we'll wait and see. But again, on the face of it, it appears that our own government, our own public institutions, the people that we have held in high esteem and regard to protect the public interest, have been engaged in activities that violate that trust, that violate that fiduciary duty, and that could very well be criminal. And we're going to move that forward as quickly as possible.
Randy, I just want to express my gratitude to you. I am thrilled to hear what you're saying. It was my hope that you would come tonight to say exactly what you've said, that this is being seriously considered, it's being looked at, it's being investigated, because what David revealed is shocking, and the impact of it will ripple right through this country because of it identifies corruption, it identifies malfeasance, criminal behavior that needs to be held to account if in fact it's true. And I'm sure you've gotten a ton of emails. I certainly have, saying, can this be proven? And, my response is it requires a very serious investigation. And the response should be, let's look at it. And everybody, in my view, should be standing up and saying, this needs to be taken seriously. It needs to be looked at.
Oh, this is beyond shocking. I don't know if there's a word that actually describes this reprehensible, this egregious behavior. Let's remember these are people and institutions who are appointed, elected, engaged by the public to protect our freedoms, to protect our accountability, to ensure that we remain a free society and that there's a well-managed, and let's just go back to our Constitution, that gives the guiding principles that under the supremacy of God, this Constitution is written and this Charter of Rights is written, and that we will strive for peace, order, and good government. That is our hallmark as Canadians. And to see that our government is trampling on a peaceful society and causing division within our society and creating chaos and turmoil instead of order. And good government is not found in a criminal organization or those organizations that employ and engage in criminal activity. This, I'm not sure. I think I can say this, Ted, is that there's a great many Canadians who don't want to believe the evidence that is before us.
Right.
They don't want to believe that our government could be engaged in such skullduggery, such nefarious behavior, under the guise of doing something good for us. Like, I think this is perplexing to people, and we're not sure how to deal with the facts that are in front of our eyes that are contrary to the narrative that is provided by the governments and our media.
Randy, I would agree with you. In my experience as a therapist, what I would say is that the loss of a dream is more painful than the loss of a person. And if this information is true, it undermines a foundational belief that we have, that we live in a free and democratic country, and that the people that are in government are acting in our best interests. And to think otherwise is alarming. I'm curious if you've received calls from your colleagues in government at the various levels. Have you received any requests for information from the mainstream media? How are they responding to this information?
No, there's been a complete rejection of facts and evidence. And I would say we've had a complete rejection of facts and evidence in our country for 17 months. We have been promoting all our politicians, all our political parties, except one, all our media have, except the alternative media, have been promoting a falsehood. They've been promoting a narrative, and they have willingly, purposely rejected the revealing of facts and evidence for going on 18 months now. And they're too invested. They're too invested in the narrative, even for those who know better. They're too invested to now be truthful. And, we saw that this week in Ontario politics, where we had an elected member of the Conservative Ford government. And I shouldn't even say conservative, because there is no difference now between conservatives and liberals. That's obvious. There's no difference between conservatives, liberals, and NDP. They are all invested in the COVID narrative. But just 2 weeks ago, Doug Ford said that there would be no mandatory vaccines in Ontario. And since that time, he has made it mandatory for schools, for universities, for nurses, for healthcare. And then he had the audacity as well to also make it mandatory for his caucus elected members, after telling them that he would not do such a thing. And we had one member of the Ontario caucus who was not permitted an exemption, but refused to get the vaccine. But the instructive point in that press conference by MPP Rick Nichols was this, in my view, is Rick Nichols, in his 4-minute teleconference, explained to the people listening that for 17 months, he knew what the Ford government was doing was wrong. He explained that he had pleaded with the government, with the premier, with the caucus, that these measures were taking a terrible toll on the people in his riding. And they were even taking a terrible toll on his own family members, that they had lost their ability to earn a living, and people were in despair and full of anxiety. And but he continued to support the government for 17 months. I will take him at his word that he was pleading, but he continued to support the government in these awful, horrendous measures. And until he was going to be forced to take the vaccine himself. And then he found the resolve to stand up. And I think that story is one that all of your audience and all of Canadians should understand what it is that is happening to our society. It is acceptable in our society in the last 17 months to sit back and do nothing while others are harmed, but you are okay. It's acceptable in our country to, well, maybe I'll say it this way. It is too dangerous in our country to be truthful, to be honest, to represent people, that the fear of retribution, the fear of scorn and ridicule encourages people to be dishonest with themselves, with their constituents, with their community. And it is not a free country, Ted, if we cannot speak honestly.
What I see COVID has been this past 18 months is an integrity test. And it's what's disappointing, more than disappointing, is to see how many people have not passed the integrity test.
It is. Again, it's a wake-up call to us to just to reflect on our society. What have we done that encourages people to be dishonest rather than to be honest? We know, we learned many thousands of years ago, there's a commandment that has been sent to us, never to bear false witness. That is not the way forward in life. Thou shalt not lie or bear false witness. But here we are today in our society doing just that and thinking that that's the better way to be dishonest rather than truthful. It's an indictment because, Rick Nichols is not the only person. We saw this with Aaron O'Toole this past week. And Trudeau, I could go on at length, but let's just look at O'Toole for a moment. He said no to mandatory vaccines, and then he promptly, within a week, kicked out two of his members on the campaign team, the candidate from the Yukon and the sitting MP from Fort McMurray, Uradega. He kicked them out of the campaign for saying exactly that they were opposed to mandatory vaccines. We have to begin to judge people by their actions, not just their words, especially in politics. It was just a short period of time ago that Trudeau said that there would be no mandatory vaccines. And now he is saying, well, it's not mandatory, but don't expect to be on a train or a plane. And I will say to you and all your audience, if you, Ted, are too dangerous, or I, Randy, am too dangerous to go on a train or a plane because I'm unvaccinated, what makes anybody believe that I'm also too dangerous to go to the supermarket or too dangerous to go to the school to pick up my grandkids, or too dangerous to go to the hospital to get health care. We are on a deep, dark path, and there is no end in sight to how dangerous this will be unless we stand up, unless we fight back, unless we assert that we are free men and women. And thankfully, for the first time in going on 18 months, we now have an option before us to solve this madness, to solve this tyranny. And people in Canada will have a choice to make on September 20th. Do we continue on this dark and dangerous path, or do we make a change? Do we make a difference? Do we want freedom, or do we want enslavement? Do we want democracy, or do we want authoritarianism? These are the questions that should be paramount in everybody's mind when they go to the ballot box on September 20th.
Randy, I agree with you. This election, in my view, is a referendum on freedom. And it's what we're declaring is whether we want to be free and sovereign beings, or whether we'll accept being captured, enslaved, subjects of the ruling government, which we know is not representing the people. So what can we do? Where are we at? What can we do? Because we're in a very desperate situation here.
Well, let me say a few things before I get into that. Many Canadians have been cultivated. There's been a culture to encourage people to view themselves as victims and helpless, that we are beholden only to governments for our outcomes in life. And that's not true. It's a false narrative as well. And I would say to your audience, we know this to be true. By the government's own numbers, there's at least 6.5 million Canadians who are adamant and opposed to further restrictions, adamant to getting mandatory vaccines. And even those who have been coerced and intimidated to getting vaccines do not want their young children to be put at great jeopardy and risk, or any risk, over an unknown lifetime.
Oh, he's back.
There's at least 6.5 million is opposed to these measures. So there is an option. There is a solution. There is the ability to make change. And I would say this as well. Never before in my lifetime have we seen such a stark and profound choice for Canadians to have at an election. We have all the major political parties, O'Toole, Trudeau, Singh, the Greens, the Bloc. They are all in favor of more restrictions. They're all in favor of mandatory vaccines. And you have a singular party, a singular national leader who is opposed to this. So the choice is simple. For those people who want freedom, there is one party to look at. There is one political home for freedom in this country, and that's Maxime Bernier and the People's Party of Canada. So for those 6.5 million people plus, if they want to have freedom and not enslavement, if they want to have democracy and not authoritarianism, if they want to be able to see their children and grandchildren, or the freedom of mobility, or the freedom to worship, or the freedom of expression, then there's one choice on September 20th. And I would say, Ted, to all of the people at Vaccine Choice and everybody else who is listening, if you want freedom, all it will take is to get off the couch on September 20th. All it will take is to be honest in the privacy of the ballot box. All it will do is, if you want to be involved and engaged, if you want to help out and help those 6.5 million people find their political home for freedom, make some phone calls, put a lawn sign in your yard, encourage others to do the same, and we will get our Canada back. If not, our Canada, as we once knew it, will not exist. Because I will say to you, Ted, if we don't regain our freedom on September 20th this year, we're quite fortunate. We still have an electoral process that has integrity. Every ballot in Canada is counted by hand. Every ballot is watched over by scrutineers from our campaigns. Some people may be confused with the American process with Dominion voting machine, but here in Canada, we still count our ballots individually with witnesses who can object to any wrongdoing. I don't know, I'm going to say, if the PPC and if Freedom doesn't win, this will probably be the last election that we will ever have any integrity in our electoral process. So it is indeed an election for our ages. It's an election and a referendum of Canada. And we will see what Canada is made of on September 20th.
Randy, I agree with you. I think this is the most important election in my lifetime for sure. And it will dictate the country that our children and grandchildren will live in. And I'm of the opinion that unless there is a shift here, that we are far down the path of tyranny, and an election with the wrong result will accelerate that tyranny.
I can't agree with you more, Ted. But I see optimism. It was interesting last week. Then, I believe it was the night before Dr. David Martin was on your show last week. The Nova Scotia provincial government had a provincial election in Nova Scotia. And there was a tiny element of that election that gives me a great deal of hope, a great deal of confidence. And I retain my confidence in Canadians as a result. I don't have a lot of confidence in government, but I have a great deal of confidence in Canadian people. And they weathered a terrible storm and carried a significant, horrible burden for the last 17 months. But in that Nova Scotia provincial election, there was one candidate I would ask all your audience to look at. This one candidate previously had attended anti-lockdown rallies in Nova Scotia. She had spoken out against the lockdown measures in Nova Scotia. And as every political party does, she was booted out of caucus. She was scorned and ridiculed, marginalized, because she wasn't a team player. But she had the resolve, she had the courage, and she stood for re-election as an independent member for the legislature. And although the polls, the last poll before the election said she was at best going to get 8% of the vote in her riding, when the ballots were cast, when the ballots were voted, when they were all counted, she ended up with over 50% of the vote
Wow.
in her run. And that's instructive to us, because for we know now that although people are fearful to be speaking out in public on this for that fear and that marginalization and that scorn, what people are too fearful to do in public, they have the full confidence to do in the secrecy and the privacy of the vote and of the ballot box. So don't be surprised that the poll numbers show one thing, but what we're seeing on the ground is there is a great groundswell of support for freedom in our country. There's a great groundswell and tide of Canadians who have said enough is enough. We'll play along with this for a couple of weeks, but now we know you're engaged in falsehoods and you're destroying our lives, and we're going to toss the buggers out on September 20th.
Well, Randy, I have to say that when you just told that story, I didn't know what the results were, so I didn't know how your story would end. And that just sent shivers down my spine to know that this is possible. We have to produce a different result on September the 20th. And, you know, what I'm encouraged by as well is, you talked about this a little bit already today, is so many people didn't think we would get to this place and kept thinking, you know what, it's not going to get that bad. They're never going to bring in passports. They're never going to mandate vaccines. And, you know, they have done all of that in the last 2 weeks. And, you know, I had this sense of calm on Monday when our own BC government announced vaccine passports starting, I think, September the 13th. And I was wondering about my sense of calm, and I think the reason was, Randy, is I felt validated, because we have been saying for 2 years or for 18 months, this is where it's going. And we were marginalized, we were ridiculed, we were told that, we're not worth considering. We're misinformation and we ought to be censored from mainstream media and social media. And everything that we have said is presenting. And now that people are feeling it themselves, they're starting to recognize the danger. And, I think your hope and my hope is that we didn't have to go this far. We could have stepped back, but unfortunately, humanity sometimes needs to feel the hurt before they step up into their power.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate, like in every society, Ted, there are those who have foresight, and there are those that choose not to have foresight. There are those who see the hurt of others and speak out. We learn this as little children in the schoolyard that, if there's a bully in the schoolyard, there's generally at least one person, maybe two, who will stand up to that bully and give him a black eye that's necessary. Well, others won't. And we know that this is just human nature. And we also know that we saw this in spades in the last 17 months, that, that many people, as long as they were not being harmed or injured directly, it was okay to be silent. But there's always those who have to speak out, like vaccine choice, and like others, Liberty Coalition, like Fearless, like there's a great many people who have spoken out. But now, my office has been swamped and overwhelmed, commissioning oaths and affidavits for people on the mandatory vaccines, and hearing from a great many people who now are facing a terrible choice, a choice between putting their life at risk or putting their livelihood at risk. They are being intimidated and coerced. And they know that once the injection is done, you can't undo this.
Right.
The you can't say, oops, take it back out. And so a great many people now have realized that it's time to draw a line in the sand. It's a time to stand up and assert our freedoms. We may have been naive. We may have been somewhat gullible. We may have been whatever, thinking that government was going to be benevolent and kind and generous and compassionate for us. But now they know that that is untrue. The government agenda is going to hurt them one way or the other. Either their loss of their ability to earn a livelihood, or to put their life in mortal danger and risk.
Randy, I'm grateful to you. You are one of the few that are standing up and being unambiguous about this. You are calling it what it is. This is a war on freedom. It's a war on our sovereignty. And it seems like so many are not willing to call it what it is, but you are. And I'm grateful that you're standing as bold and as strong as you are. You're providing leadership at a very important time in our history here as a country.
Well, thank you very much, Ted. Let's encourage others to be honest, to be truthful, to stand up, to draw that line in the sand, to take bold action, to be truthful and honest in the ballot box, to become involved, to volunteer, and let's do this for our children, for my children, for your children, for our grandchildren. Just as my parents and my grandparents stood up and fought for my freedom to ensure that I would live in a free country with opportunity and prosperity. And let's do that for our children and grandchildren. We can do no less.
This is our battle. This is our fight. It's time. We need to step up and claim this one and stand strong, stand free, so that, as you said, so that our children and grandchildren can enjoy the kind of livelihood that we've been blessed to enjoy, because it's at risk.
I fully agree.
Randy, and I'm also grateful that you've taken the what David shared with us last week. You've taken it seriously. You are pursuing it to see whether this has integrity, whether if what David is saying is true. The implications of this are huge, and so I'm grateful that you're investigating this further. We need to know. Canadians need to know. The world needs to know whether this kind of deception and malfeasance is at work or whether it's not.
Yeah. Well, I would encourage it. We absolutely have to, and thankfully people have been contributing to No More Lockdowns, to Liberty Coalition, to various groups. We need to collaborate, to coordinate, and we need to put these criminals behind bars at the end of the day. So help us out. For all those who are watching and listening tonight, the election is important. We need to get there. But if you can help us out and find out exactly who the criminals are, and let's make sure that they bear a consequence that is proportionate to the harm that they have perpetrated on our country.
We need to know what the truth is. We have to be seekers of truth. And we have to have the courage to face the truth when we see it. So, Randy, what's the best way to support that initiative?
Well, you can certainly contribute to nomorelockdowns.ca. We have a legal fund there. And as this goes on, we're going to be identifying further groups who are coordinating with us on this endeavor. I'm hope that Vaccine Choice will want to coordinate with us on that as well. I'm sure Liberty Coalition Canada will be participating in that. But for the time being, help us out at nomorelockdowns.ca and stay tuned. We're going to get the best legal counsel. We're going to find And I would say to everybody in your audience, if you know that individual who is full of integrity, full of credibility, and unimpeachable by our media, who might want to be that person who lays this private information, or if you know other legal counsel who may want to participate on this legal team, or however you can help out, reach out, and I'm sure all of us will work together to find truthfulness, to find honesty, and to end this long journey of tragedy that Canada has undertaken in the last 17 months.
And Randy, I just want to take a minute, and for those that aren't aware, we had a couple of great pieces of information today. So the legal action in BC that was undertaken by Action for Canada and Rocco Galati has been filed. The file number has been received. And so that action is moving forward. The other announcement today was that Stand on Guard for Thee and Rocco Galati are initiating an immediate injunction against both vaccine mandates and against vaccine passports. And so I'm absolutely thrilled to know that both of those initiatives are in the works.
Yeah, and I should just say this, like the legal remedy, the legal courts we have to utilize them. But, and the initiative that we're undertaking is more along the criminal function. And the criminal courts move much faster than the civil courts. And this has been one of the difficulties. Canadians have relied on our court system to find remedy. And although we need to do that, it is not the only remedy, and it is a very lengthy and time-consuming and costly avenue to find a remedy. And I would say this, everybody should recognize that this is more of a political crisis than a legal crisis. This is it's not a health crisis, it's a political crisis. And September 20th gives us a much faster remedy than any court ever will. So the next less than 30 days now, if you want to make a change, get out there, find your local PPC candidate, volunteer, donate, put in lawn signs. That's will get us out of this tyranny much faster than the legal courts will. Well, still applying the legal pressures within our court system.
Good advice, Randy. Brandy, thank you for joining us tonight. Delighted to have you. Let's have you back again when you've got more updates for us.
Will do. It's been a pleasure, Ted, and everybody at Vaccine Choice. Thank you very much for inviting me on tonight. And let's regain our freedom. And as I said to Maxime Bernier the other day, I said, Max, on September 21st, many people in Canada are going to wake up, and they're going to wake up in a purple haze on September 21st.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Good night.